Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Craig Melrose and I'm an Attainment Advisor with Education Scotland. I'm joined by colleagues from the Scottish Attainment Challenge Policy Unit and Education Scotland's Scottish Attainment Challenge team, who will co-deliver today's session entitled the Scottish Attainment Challenge Maximising Progress. For your information, this session will be recorded and available shortly on the Scottish Learning Festival portal until the end of November. We'll start with a few protocols and expectations. If I could ask you please to ensure that your microphones and cameras remain off for the duration of this session. But please try and be as present in the learning space as you can. I know things are busy. And do use the chat pane, and if time allows, we will bring comments in for discussion. Although there is a SAC Blether session on these themes from 3:45 this afternoon. You can also post resource links in the chat pane and to communicate any technical difficulties. And if you do lose connection, please don't panic, just come back in following the joining instructions that you received via email. If you'd also like to tweet about the experience this afternoon, please use the hashtag SLF online. Today's session will summarise the evidence gathered from some recent publications with a reflection on what has worked well and what needs to improve in the challenge of closing the poverty-related attainment gap. We will hear from Scottish Government colleagues who will outline engagement since these documents were published, and also on the importance of maximising progress this year, one that the Cabinet Secretary mentioned on Tuesday evening as seeing the most substantial annual investment in the programme so far. Attainment Advisor Karen Pride will provide an account on the impact of the programme on children and young people through Leadership for Partnerships. And then Patricia Watson, the Senior Responsible Officer for the Scottish Attainment Challenge from Education Scotland, will outline plans for continuing to build momentum moving forward. 5 key Scottish Attainment Challenge related reports published recently help us identify progress and related key issues for continued consideration as the programme develops. And some of you will be familiar, I'm sure, with these messages, some perhaps not. So forgive me if selected highlights from each you already know well. The first of which is the transition from primary to secondary school findings from the Growing Up in Scotland report published through the University of Dundee. And it states that the majority of children had either a positive or a moderate transition experience. However, children from the more deprived areas had poorer transition experiences than those in less deprived areas. And it references existing international research which suggests that children with educational support needs are less likely to have a positive transition. It regards the addressing of any anxieties and misconceptions about secondary school while children are still in primary school as being important. Despite the vast majority of children reporting that they often or always felt treated fairly by their teachers, both before and after moving to secondary school, the results showed a notable decline in the proportion of children who reported that their teachers always treated them fairly. And children who had a positive transition experience demonstrated higher levels of improvement in their language development than children with a moderate or negative one. A large majority of parents reported increased costs in relation to their child starting secondary school, with 1 in 4 of those in the lowest income households finding it difficult or very difficult to meet costs associated with their child's schooling despite financial help. And the report promotes targeting children from more socially disadvantaged backgrounds in order to provide more tailored transition support. It further suggests that we foster and maintain good school-parent relationships and that the system also ensures that parents are fully informed and supported to help their child with the transition, making parents more aware of their importance during this time. It promotes greater use by schools of their recording and monitoring information to better inform local approaches to dealing effectively with incidents of bullying behaviour. Addressing the Poverty-Related Attainment Gap 2018 to 20 is a paper collating cross-sectoral inspection evidence, and the findings state positively that schools have a clear and strong understanding of the vision for education in Scotland, namely to achieve excellence and equity. And senior leaders across most sectors continue to ensure a strong focus on raising attainment and addressing the poverty-related attainment gap. Empowerment to lead improvement that reflects the needs of schools, communities, children and young people is also a positive aspect found in most schools. And senior leaders and staff have increased confidence and knowledge when identifying the poverty-related attainment gap in local contexts. However, the report states that the quality of leadership of addressing the poverty-related attainment gap in early years settings and in special schools is too variable. It recognises that almost all schools take good account of the National Improvement Framework priorities and drivers in their strategic planning, and that there is a shared understanding across all sectors of the importance of using data and evidence to support decision making. There is growing evidence of increased collaboration across the system, and emerging evidence indicates that literacy, numeracy and health and wellbeing targeted interventions are leading to improved outcomes for children and young people experiencing barriers to their learning resulting from their social economic circumstances. And in the majority of schools, teachers are increasingly involved in moderation activities to support their professional judgments of levels of achievement in literacy and numeracy, with moderation activities well embedded in a few schools. The report also advises that more work needs to be done in gathering and taking account of a range of data and evidence to monitor and evaluate the impact of change and improvement on outcomes for learners. That, along with effective use of data to raise attainment and close the poverty-related attainment gap. It recognises that the use of national benchmarks in curricular areas beyond literacy and numeracy should remain an important area for improvement for schools. An increase in staff engagement in the analysis of data, enabling them to plan interventions and evaluate the impact is also recommended. Effective strategies are in place to monitor and evaluate the impact of many targeted initiatives. However, an even closer focus on monitoring and tracking the progress of cohorts, groups or individuals is encouraged. And teachers should continue, where and when possible, to engage in moderation activities with colleagues in other schools and sectors to improve their understanding of the moderation cycle. A conclusion drawn from this report is that schools are unable to consistently provide levels of attainment or progress of learners across all curricular areas, with all too often planned learning not found to be differentiated well enough and therefore not sufficiently involving learners in planning learning. The focus of whole class approaches to learning is not yet implemented effectively to take account of the range of learning needs, which requires a more responsive approach towards how well children and young people progress in learning. Sketch notes and further examples of highly effective practice are available at both school and local authority level within the linked document. This report focuses on the Year 5 evaluation of Attainment Scotland Fund across pupil equity funding, Challenge Authority and schools programme funding streams. And the findings reported include that the gap has widened for more measures than it is narrowed. However, largely this is not due to performance worsening, rather performance has improved but not kept pace with performance of those from the least deprived areas. There is continued evidence of systemic change in terms of culture and ethos towards improving understanding of barriers faced by pupils and families affected by poverty, approaches to equity becoming more embedded within the school, and a more collaborative system at school and local authority level. And 90% of head teachers reported to have seen an improvement in closing the poverty-related attainment gap as a result of Attainment Scotland Fund supported approaches. During the period of COVID-19, there was strong evidence of new partnership and collaborations, and the role of attainment advisors continued to be highly valued in providing support at local authority and school level, with strong recognition of their importance in facilitating links between national, local and school contexts. Particularly in 2020, there was considerable focus on health and well-being and on engaging with families and communities. And the evidence suggests COVID-19 will impact on progress towards closing the poverty-related attainment gap for some time yet. Despite this, 88% of head teachers reported expecting to see improvement in closing the gap over the next 5 years. And the Attainment Scotland Fund report states that progress towards the SAC long-term outcomes is expected to continue through an education system which is aspirational, inclusive in practice and approaches for all, including teachers and parents. Recommendations from this Audit Scotland report from March 2021 are given as actions for Scottish Government, Education Scotland, regional improvement collaboratives and councils. And during the pandemic, there has been variation in learning experience of children and young people, and there is a risk that this will exacerbate the poverty-related attainment gap. Pupils living in the most challenging circumstances have been most affected by school closures. There is also variation in education performance across councils, and the effects of COVID-19, including the economic impacts and the public health measures which have been put in place, are likely to increase levels of inequality experienced by children and young people. It recognises that many young people have reported that their mental health has been affected by the impacts of COVID-19, and that the increased focus on supporting and monitoring well-being needs to continue. School education aims to improve children and young people's health and well-being and support wider attainment outcomes such as vocational subjects and qualifications. Recommendations include helping schools to build up their data analytical, evaluation and quality improvement skills, stating that better data is needed to better understand if the outcomes like well-being are improving, and supports using evidence-based quality improvement approaches and the wider sharing of learning. The report also suggests an increase in the type of opportunities, awards and qualifications available to children and young people, and a greater involvement of young people and parents in planning. Partnership collaborative local planning is supported to improve longer term outcomes and to deliver the local education response to COVID-19. Councils are encouraged to reduce variability in outcome by a more consistent application of the drivers of improvement. And the report acknowledges that the government and councils recognise that addressing inequalities must be at the heart of the response to COVID-19. The following are comments and observations from the Closing the Poverty-Related Attainment Gap, a report on progress 2016 to 2021. It states that over the 5-year time period to 2021, a number of key elements have been put in place that provide strong foundations for ongoing progress. The gap is closing and significant progress is being made. There are variations, however, there are variations in the pace of that progress across the country. There is a systemic change in the terms of culture and ethos and leadership, with a focus on equity becoming more embedded and sustained in schools, communities and local authorities, with greater awareness and understanding of the barriers facing children and young people adversely affected by socio-economic disadvantage, which has led to a wide range of approaches and interventions being implemented to meet the needs of children and young people. Local authority strategies have been developed to reflect a number of broad priorities based on attainment gap data, previously successful approaches, and engagement with head teachers, partners or services. An investment in high quality professional learning opportunities has resulted in higher quality learning, teaching and assessment, focusing on achieving equity. Literacy and numeracy interventions are embedded in most schools who are increasingly more confident in using data effectively. Partnerships with universities are helping to improve pedagogy as well as the use and analysis of data. And there has been an increase in collaboration of local authority and school level to support equity. Schools are more consistent and effectively working with families, leading to improvements in parenting skills, parental ambition, and employability. 3 highlighted recommendations are that greater consideration be given to extending the range of data sources, thereby providing deeper insight into the sustained benefits of the challenge for young people. The intensity of approaches and levels of investment required to sustain improvements in settings with the highest concentrations of deprivation can be quite different to those required in other settings with lower levels of deprivation or with different challenges and barriers to learning. And as children's rights become embedded in all aspects of society, there is increasing urgency and scope for the voices of our children and young people to influence the interventions and approaches taken that will improve their life chances. Many thanks for listening to that relatively brief but speedy tour around 5 key SAC-related documents. I'm delighted to introduce to you David Begley, who's the lead officer with the Scottish Attainment Challenge Policy Unit at Scottish Government. David.
Thanks, Craig. So Craig's run through these 5 reports that clearly bring a range of published evidence to the system and contribute to the body of evidence that's informing how we maximise progress in closing the poverty attainment gap now and what the Scottish Attainment Challenge looks like going forward. Clearly, though, in addition to all of that, it's important to hear from the wide range of colleagues who are working in the system, contributing to the collective effort in education and beyond to tackle the poverty attainment gap. So since the turn of the year, both Scottish Government and Education Scotland have undertaken extensive engagement with colleagues, partners, stakeholders across the system to hear what's been working, what could work better, and what changes might help us accelerate or maximise progress in closing the poverty attainment gap now in this current academic year and going forward over the course of the current parliamentary term. So these engagements they've included, for example, Education Scotland hosted Wee Blethers, some of which have focused on some think pieces provided by Professor Chris Chapman at Glasgow University, designed to provoke and challenge our thinking about what we're doing and, is what we're doing working? Can we do things differently? And recognising indeed what is working. We've been hearing from our colleagues in local government, in COSLA, ARES, Directors of Education, on how the challenge is put together and what's working and what's not. We've also engaged widely with local authorities, SAC leads, with school leaders, with practitioners in a range of forums as part of the ongoing engagement as we deliver the Scottish Attainment Challenge, and been listening carefully to what they're telling us. We've engaged with third sector partners, some of whom we are already working with regularly, and others we've reached out to hear what their experience has been as organisations that engage in the challenge but not necessarily engage directly with government or Education Scotland. We know that in schools and authorities, a whole range of different organisations contribute to the work that's undertaken in local contexts. And we've sought to gather the views of children and young people. Those views are incredibly important as we think about how we approach tackling the poverty attainment gap and what they think will work for them and land well with them. So we've gathered what we would best describe as a snapshot of views over the summer and worked closely with CLD Manager Scotland to obtain those views, and we're considering them in terms of what works, what's likely to land well with children and young people impacted by poverty, and to inform how we work in future to hear those views at a national level, alongside all the work that we know is taking place in local authorities and in school settings and communities to listen to children and young people. We've met with professional bodies for their views on how the challenge operates and what we can do to support efforts to maximise progress. And importantly, we've convened a small advisory group with representation from COSLA, from ADES, from school leaders and middle leaders, from academics who are undertaking research in both pedagogy but also in the impact of poverty on people's lives and on communities, and from third sector organisations, all to help shape our thinking in terms of what the future of the challenge might look like and how that challenge as a programme can be designed to maximise progress in closing the poverty-related attainment gap. Can we just skip on to the next slide, please, Craig? So, having undertaken all that engagement and continuing to undertake that engagement, what has it told us? It tells us that in addition to the government retaining a focus is evidenced by £1 billion commitment to tackling the poverty attainment gap and supporting education recovery over the course of this Parliament. It tells us that that commitment clearly remains a priority in schools and other learning environments. It tells us that poverty doesn't only exist in a few select areas of the country, but in fact it impacts children and young people across the whole country, and we need to respond to that. The findings of the equity audit published in January 2021 have been confirmed through this engagement. It's clear that, as was found in the equity audit itself, our stakeholders, practitioners, school leaders are telling us that COVID-19 has inevitably had a significant impact on the way we work. And as we think about closing the gap and we think about recovery, we absolutely must ensure that we retain a focus on the health and well-being of the children and young people we're working with, but also of the staff who are working with these children and young people too. There are clear messages coming from all this engagement, and there's evidence of that too, that work is taking place now that is having an impact, and that we can learn more from that. We can share that more widely and learn from areas also in which we see there's still scope to make more progress, and share that learning too. And as we think about sharing learning, we need to think about collaboration. We're hearing that collaboration is absolutely vital, and that's collaboration within schools, across schools, within authorities, across authorities, working together with peers, but also recognising that schools can't do it all. So collaboration with the range of services, the range of offers, the range of partners in local communities is also vital to the success of any approach to tackling the poverty-related attainment gap and improving outcomes for children and young people impacted by poverty.
Now, do you want to stay on now?
I think that was just a wee slip off mute there. As we think about collaboration, sharing practice, with collaboration, we want to see that also happen, and we hear our colleagues in the system tell us that this should be happening up and down the learner journey too, from early learning and childcare right through to tertiary education. So looking beyond the school in terms of the learner journey too. And also at a planning level, there's scope to embed that collaboration and make those links. The Scottish Attainment Challenge shouldn't be an outlier. It shouldn't operate in isolation. We're being advised by our colleagues in the system that it has to be linked into wider planning to ensure that the opportunities for cross-service collaboration are identified. So at the outset, linking local planning into other local plans like children's services plans, like child poverty action planning. So we're taking stock on all of this as we think about the refreshed SAC programme, but there are messages here alongside the published evidence that we can think about now in this year as we think about maximising progress, to take those on board and respond to the evidence that's out there, respond to the views of the system, and look to maximise progress in closing the gap now. So With that, I'll hand over to Karen, who'll talk about, I suppose to some extent, what this means in practice and give some examples of some really impactful work that's taking place in the system now. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. The role of the Attainment Advisor involves making policy and research experiential, ultimately to breathe life into policy and distill what's contained in the reports we've heard about today, and work alongside a range of stakeholders to convert that information into practice and experiences that are meaningful, impactful, and mobilising for all of our children and young people. So what I'll share with you very concisely today is a snapshot example of how, and I emphasise the use of how, a school are achieving exactly that in Angus through Leadership for Partnerships using the 4 Ps. So the 4 Ps that you see on screen, thank you, are recommendations from the Christie Commission. And for anyone unfamiliar with what that is, it was led by Dr. Campbell Christie and published in 2011 to look across the whole field of public service delivery, including education, and examine challenges, obstacles and opportunities that lay ahead for us over the next decade. A roadmap for the future reform of public service delivery in Scotland was produced, and 10 years on, it's as pertinent now as it was then. In fact, even more so now, given the context of COVID-19. So today's example of progress evidences a new partnership that aims to embody the principles of the Commission by creating new ways of working through what is described under people, partnership, prevention and performance. And we'll move on to the next slide. Thank you. So in 2021, Lady Lone Primary School in Arbroath entered into a partnership with the Social Supermarket in Forfar to launch its own mini market to provide affordable food while helping to reduce food waste. In terms of the school's profile, 85% of children live in deciles 1 to 4 of the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, and 47% are living in the most deprived areas. The school use a vast array of evidence to identify what children need from them and their partners to ensure learners feel safe, secured, loved and achieving the best possible outcomes. Through their use of evidence and community engagement, the school identified how they could integrate service provision through partnership working to provide learners, their families and the school community with what they needed, particularly in light of the challenges from COVID-19. Thus, the concept for the Lady Lone S-Mart, as it's shortened to, was realised, and the involvement of children, their families and the local community in service design took hold. The school transformed their old bike shed with help from the Arbroath Men's Shed and East Seaton Farm to prepare the building, again working in partnership to be as effective and efficient as possible. The children sourced a variety of products such as tins, cakes, fruit and vegetables, which were all at 50% or cheaper than they would be in a supermarket through over-ordered stock. A membership is required to shop at the mini mart, which costs £5, but is supported by Angus Council for people adversely affected by COVID, and also through the school's PEF allocation. The work is sustainable, and the school will use the funds to reinvest for the benefit of learners, but also to fund community engagement as well, which is ongoing. It's inclusive, everyone can use it, parents, staff in the school, members of the local community. Its doors are open to everyone. And the S-Mart, just like any other shop, people can choose their own items, and because everything is at least 50% less than a regular shop, customers' money is going much, much further. And if I can ask you to move to the next slide, please, Craig. So whilst the work is informed by data, rooted in evidence, underpinned by a clear rationale, and sounds good in practice, we always have to ask ourselves the so what question. Is the work delivering what we intended it to? And if so, how do we know? Some people, some leaders, can feel overwhelmed by the weight of that question and can invest a lot of energy into the planning and delivery stage, hoping that the outcomes naturally follow suit. However, we all know that plans rarely run uninterrupted, and we're required to tweak our plans with what they need, and that's what makes practice sustainable. So on that point, sustainability does not mean sustained. It actually means being prepared to change, adapt and evolve. So how is Leadership for Partnerships actively delivering what is needed in Lady Lone Primary School through their mini market partnership? Well, the partnership is very new and evidence of impact is limited, but early analysis show improved participation and engagement. In terms of literacy, the school is developing vocabulary as their improvement priority for this year. And we know that vocabulary is learned incidentally and implicitly outside of the classroom, which the SMART is helping with. With almost 20% of children across P1 to 7 in the school having English as an additional language, the SMART is helping to bridge vocabulary gaps also. The partnership is also helping to improve children's extended writing experiences. In terms of health and wellbeing, children are also reporting the partnership as a positive learning experience and feeling a sense of connection to the school and their community. Children are reporting improved relationships with adults and peers, as well as increased confidence. Parents are also reporting the dignified way that the partnership has been designed and delivered in comparison to some other experiences they've had also. In terms of numeracy, the partnership is supporting numeracy across learning and encouraging budgeting and numerical awareness through pricing products and being aware of number and value. Further impact relates to developing skills for future employment whilst developing good attitudes towards employability. So whilst the impact is early in its stage, it's predicted that this particular partnership has got a lot more to give in the long run, and I look forward to seeing how it develops over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I'm now delighted to introduce to you Education Scotland's Senior Responsible Officer for the Scottish Attainment Challenge and Interim Strategic Director, Patricia Watson. Patricia.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks to all three of you for that summary of everything that's been going on for a number of years over the Attainment Challenge in Scotland. I want to talk a wee bit in this using this next couple of slides around the role of Education Scotland and how we are supporting the system to move forward and to continue to make the progress that we've already described in all of these reports around the progress that we're making around the Scottish Attainment Challenge. On the screen in front of you, you can see this diagram that describes the three functions of the attainment advisors, and it's how we encapsulate the job of, if you like, of an attainment advisor in Education Scotland. They're actually functions that are embedded within other roles right across our organisation, and that means that we are working collectively as one team, Education Scotland, to support the system. But the attainment advisor role was really quite an innovative concept at the start of the Attainment Challenge. It built on what we knew had worked well in the London Challenge and the Manchester Challenge, and we're learning from the Welsh Challenge and other work that is happening across different parts of the UK and wider. But what is unique to the role in Scotland is that we have committed through the First Minister's determination that every single local authority in Scotland would have a link attainment advisor, and that's been a core piece of the jigsaw right from the foundation of the programme. So the work that attainment advisors have done over the first 5 years and continue to do is really crucial in supporting the system to really consider how they are accelerating the progress of closing the poverty-related attainment gap, and how we can maximise the expertise both within Education Scotland, but more importantly, the expertise that we see as a team of 32 going right across Scotland, that we can bring that back to the centre and distill the examples of good practice similar to the one that Karen has just been describing for us. And there are many examples of that attainment advisors can share. We share through the National Improvement Hub, through various publications throughout the year, and of course in linking in with individual local authorities and regional improvement collaboratives. So providing advice and guidance is really important role for the attainment advisor. Your attainment advisor can provide advice around the actual delivery of the programme. If there is any aspects of the national guidance that you're unclear about, they have really strong links with our Scottish Government policy colleagues. We understand the intention behind the guidance, as well as, if you like, the words on the page. And sometimes we know that in a very busy teaching and learning environment, it's difficult to digest a lot of the paperwork that may come your way. So the attainment advisors work directly with local authority leads, with schools, with other organisations to help to unpack that guidance and make it meaningful within that individual context that you're all working within. They also gather together under rigorous in their search, if you like, for appropriate research and evidence that helps to underpin the use of different interventions. We absolutely are signed up to the notion and the concept of evidence-based improvement, and therefore it's imperative that our attainment advisors are skilled and knowledgeable in what is working well across the system and how they can actually help you to understand what might work better in your context and how you can evaluate the interventions that you're putting in place. They are there also, though, to make sure that the maximum potential is reached from the Attainment Scotland Fund, and so providing advice and guidance around what is good governance around the use of the fund, what is effective participatory budgeting, for example, within the PEF guidance, what it means to involve children, young people, their families and communities and partners in making the decisions about what will work best in your context to ensure that the maximum use of the fund is delivered and in order to support those young people that are living in the greatest areas of poverty. In terms of leading improvement and building capacity, the attainment advisors, and many of you will know and will have experienced and attended a number of professional learning activities, either at national level through the webinars and the blethers and so on that we have particularly focused on over the last 18 months from Education Scotland, but also within local authority contexts. Our attainment advisors work with local authority staff to develop more bespoke approaches to build professional learning that absolutely meet the context that you're working within and the needs that fit with your local authority and school improvement planning. They work with individual schools and head teachers and groups of schools and deliver cluster improvement approaches through professional learning and that bespoke support. And they also bring into the mix a number of other colleagues across Education Scotland who have specialist expertise in curriculum development, in particular curricular areas such as literacy and numeracy and health and wellbeing, but also working too with our HMI colleagues in looking at how is the evidence that's been gathered through inspection, how can that help us to be focused on improvement in a particular school, how can we actually work together to make sure that that evidence and scrutiny work is informing the improvement work that we're delivering through the regional teams in Education Scotland. Our attainment advisors have also more recently begun to participate in a new programme of activity that we're developing with ADES and with Scottish Government and local government colleagues, which is the programme of collaborative improvement. A couple of pilots have only taken place really recently, but they will move on, and attainment advisors will be working again with local authority colleagues from right across Scotland in that peer review exercise, and also with our HMI colleagues. And I wanted also to highlight that our attainment advisors are trained and knowledgeable in improvement methodology, and they use that methodology where they can, working again with local authorities and school staff to deliver small tests of change, to think about how those can be scaled up and how we can maximise the benefits of our learning. In terms of self-evaluation, we've heard a lot about data through the slides. All of the reports that Craig summarised talk about the need for effective use of data and the fact that that is improving across the country, but we need to keep moving that forward, and our aim is that every single practitioner has the skills and confidence to make effective use of their data at classroom level, at school level and across the different sectors that you work in. So our attainment advisors are trained in evaluative writing. They are able to help and skilled in helping to support self-evaluation through the use of quality indicators. And again, working with HMI colleagues, we are developing new approaches to delivering professional learning around that. And we're also looking at how we can support better professional learning around curriculum development and evaluation of the impact of curriculum pathways on particularly those young people living in the greatest with the greatest poverty. So all of Education Scotland's colleagues are there to help you keep moving your work forward. And I think it's really important that we maximise the use of that resource. So I just invite you in listening this afternoon to think about Are you aware of the balance of those different functions, of the support that's available, the wide range of support that's available from Education Scotland, from attainment advisors and from other staff? And are you maximising the potential of that support for your local context? Do you understand how you can access that support, either through your local authority, SAC lead, or through your attainment advisor, or through contacting us directly? Really important that we have a huge opportunity to bring more added value to the work that you're doing, and for you to work with us in helping us to develop our approaches to make sure that we are accelerating progress together. Craig, I'll finish with just the final slide, please. Through analysing all of those reports and all of the engagement that both Craig and David spoke about, we have pulled out these 6 themes that we think are really important in this particular year for us to focus on now. If you managed to catch yesterday's What Next for the Attainment Challenge session, then you'll be well aware that from 22-23, we intend to launch a new, refreshed approach to the programme. There is, as David said, continued commitment to the programme from Scottish ministers and the First Minister, most importantly. And so we want to make sure that this year, the 6th year of the challenge, is not simply a year of producing new guidance, moving us thinking, tweaking things, thinking about how we wind some things down, the exit programmes and so on, and waiting for that launch and refresh to come for next year, but that this year is focused on keeping that wheel turning and keeping the momentum going so that we move towards a programme that is absolutely focused on transformative change. So you can see there some really key themes that we'll be working on, particularly as a National Attainment Challenge team, but also through the senior regional advisors in Education Scotland and the rest of their regional teams, and right across Education Scotland with our National Curriculum and Inclusion and Professional Learning and Leadership teams. We're looking at improving the leadership and giving as much support as we possibly can for improving leadership and pedagogy to really focus on equity. The effective use of data, we've already mentioned several times, but there are a number of professional learning activities and built into our national professional learning programmes, opportunities for that expertise to be developed and for you to really engage in your skills and thinking about how you can improve your skills and take this work forward. Karen's mentioned that the importance of partnership working and the strand of families and communities. And again, we're looking at working and strengthening our work with the CLD sector and third sector and our national organisations in those sectors to how we can actually make sure that everyone collectively is focused on the right things and the things that we know work best. I want to mention particularly from here that this learner journey that David picked up on, and so thinking about how we actually make sure that our learners are well supported all the way through their learning experience until they are ready to fly independently and making their way in the world and being able to support themselves with the skills, the transitions, the resilience and the achievements that are going to help them to move on to the next stages of their life. And lastly, I want to just flag the effective use of PEF and Care Experience in Children's and Young People's Fund is an area that we are particularly going to focus on in some sampling work with local authorities this year, with attainment advisors looking to pull out a bit more effective evidence of good practice, and both in terms of how that PEF and that Care Experience Fund is used to support learners, but also how we are using the good governance around those funds to make sure that we have the participation of all of those different stakeholders for whom that fund is important to. The programme structure and delivery and framework will change, as I've said, and we'll have more announcements about that from the Cabinet Secretary and others in due course over coming weeks. But I want to encourage everybody to just keep thinking about how you can use these themes in focusing your work on the Attainment Challenge too, and how we can partner with you in working through some of the biggest challenges that we've yet to solve across Scottish education and for our children and young people and families across Scotland. Thanks very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks, Patricia. Just to finish, as I mentioned at the start of this, there is a related blether session at 3:45 this afternoon on the issues that we've discussed here today. However, if you cannot attend and have a question or an issue stemming from these themes, please do contact the Scottish Attainment Challenge mailbox at Education Scotland using the address on screen just now. I'd like to very quickly take this opportunity to thank David Begley and also David Leng from this the SAC policy unit at Scottish Government for their contributions, Michelle Donoghue, who put the links to documents we were mentioning today in the chat, Kylie Watson and the ES SAC team for supporting the organisation for this and subsequent event at 3:45. To Karen Pride and also Patricia Watson from the ES SAC team for their input today, and not forgetting the Speakeasy team as well, and most importantly yourselves for selecting this session this afternoon. So have a good afternoon. I hope to see some of you at 3:45 today, and if not, have a good weekend and thanks for joining.